Day of week 3, but a couple undefeated teams here on the broadcast tonight. My name is McCormiel, with me, Proper. And Andy, I've got to say one thing and one thing alone. These two teams, at least for right now, seem to be titans in the Southeast B division.
Yeah, Southeast Division C is where we're heading first and foremost. We got back-to-back Southeast Division matchups here, but FSU Esports versus KSU COD. This one's going to be quite telling for itself, as McCormiel. Number 16 ranked as far as top 25 is concerned for FSU Esports. Is this going to be the separation between second and third? Because when it comes down to the division as a whole, well, it's quite stacked.
Yeah, and overall, I think that's kind of where we at least are going to set the tone for this broadcast in general, is that this is going to be a fight for the top of the division. Maybe not that first and second place, but overall, just maybe the separation between a few teams at the very top and who's going to be kind of that mediocre pack that's just going to maybe miss out on top 3 later on in the season. Now, tons of maps to get through, tons of everything to go to, but overall, as I said beforehand, both teams undefeated overall, not just in their record, but in their map count as well. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we can take a look at the head-to-head between these two teams. I mean, FSU Gold, when they beat KSU Black just last season, can't really ride too much on top of that. It's just a win at the end of the day. But to your point, not dropping a single map are either of these two teams. 4-0 across the board. KSU obviously having a little bit more of a conversation point when it comes down to hard points, given where we were at before we started playing Control. But even still, there's not really much of a budge in between these two teams so far. This is what's going to be quite telling. Is FSU Esports deserving of that number 16 spot on everybody's power rankings, or is KSU going to yoink that away from them? This is going to be the biggest test that they have for each other, considering that in this division as a whole, here in the Southeast region, you got Mox COD, Georgia Southern, and Bama Crimson. With these two teams being utterly undefeated, this is going to be a push to the limit to be able to see where they truly stand. Second, third, potentially even that first place.
We talk about number 16, Florida State, coming in. And one of the things that they've done this season that hasn't really helped their case out at all, maybe not amongst the people that are going to be ranking, but overall just against the teams that they're playing against, they made themselves a top priority target, not just in Division C, but throughout the entirety of the Southeast. People want to take down Florida State. That could be FGCU, that could be USF, that could be UCF, any of the Florida teams, but you go anywhere even a little bit north of that where they're going to be playing inside of Division C, and everybody wants to take Florida State down. They've talked so much crap throughout the entirety of the beginning of the season to so many teams that it's almost hard to keep track at this point.
Yeah, I love the rivalries that it honestly comes through from FSU. I mean, obviously, it generally helps when you have Exile on your team when he's just pumping out all the meme content this side of the Mississippi. We take a look at FSU's roster as a whole. Maybe Brave, Exile, Mad Truth, and K-Cell. Some of these players are obviously returning from the two rosters that we had for Florida State University. That'd be K-Cell and Brave, coming from the Gold roster, their little sister team. Mad Truth is the new pickup for this roster. And obviously things are working out quite well for themselves, considering the simple fact that they have not dropped a single map, McCormiel. They lost their main Slayers going away from the Cold War season. But obviously something is coming up absolutely all spades for this team. But I would love to see who's going to be the forefront of this roster. Is it Exile? Is it going to be Mad Truth, K-Cell, Brave Can? One of these players are going to stick out more than the next. I'm excited to be able to see who is able to hold their own across all 3 game modes.
Hey, you mentioned Exile coming in after a top 16 playoff run for Florida State last season under Garnet, but we talked enough about the Florida State roster. Let's go ahead and take a look at the side of Kennesaw State. Now, Proper, overall, this is a team that is a little interesting just to look at. Last season, kind of a disappointing year overall for Kennesaw State Black, that is. They had some shining moments, but unfortunately, it was just kind of that mediocre season that we just see all the time.
Yeah, and through the regular season, though, I mean, this is where Kennesaw State University, both in the Split 1 and Split 2, the format very different as it was last year comparatively to this season, really stuck out for everybody else that was in their division at the time. And Traumatize and Shank J are the 2 players that are going to be coming back for this team here of KSU. And it's going to be quite interesting to be able to see what they do have to offer, because you'll recognize, if you are a fan of I guess, North America Call of Duty, you go a lot to these locals that have been kind of popping up across the summer into the fall into this very moment in time. You recognize one player in particular, and that is SD. SD and Snake. Have they been good enough to really stick a difference inside of the proverbial sand here for this matchup? McCormiel, you were talking quite highly about what SD's abilities can definitely bring to the table. We've seen some of their success and a lot of other locals that are happening, some other OOTs. Kid's a grinder for sure.
Yeah, it's not just this year where he's had success, but it's been previous years. You go back to Cold War, even back into Modern Warfare. There were a lot of shining moments for a young SD player who comes into this matchup with not a lot, a lot to prove, I should say, instead of the CCL overall. Because for Kennesaw State, again, I said last year they were mediocre at best, and it's kind of a harsh way to put it, but it's very true when you have over 180 teams that are fighting for a playoff spot. Not being able to make it to playoffs, kind of overall, is a relatively disappointing season, especially when you took a look back at the roster last year that they had for two different teams for Kennesaw State, neither team really being able to one-up the other when it came to overall record and, of course, late season pushes for playoffs. So when you look at SD, I think this is going to be not only a great pickup for this roster, but has already proved to be a good pickup thus far. And as we continue to push forward, I think KSU, if you are going to win this series, it's going to not only come off the back of SD having a good series, but a few players in the supporting cast also being able to learn some of what SD can bring to the team.
Yeah, when we bring up the conversation as far as keys to victory are concerned between these two teams, FSU, KSU, it didn't exactly have a lot to go off, to be completely candid with you. Both of them, again, undefeated, have not dropped a single series, have not dropped a single map in a division where it is sufficiently stacked with Mox COD, Georgia Southern, and Bama Crimson into the wake. It's more or less solidifying yourself as the top team. You want to be able to, if you do end up winning maps, you want to be able to win the convincingly, especially from FSU standpoint. Everybody's kept on talking about it. We see it on Twitter constantly in the CCL sphere about what they can end up offering for themselves. Are they going to end up being that top team? But enough just speculation around every single one of these teams. Let's go and take a look at the maps, take a look at the venues, and along with the modes of which they're going to be playing, McCormiel.
Well, map 1, we'll go ourselves to a nice Gavutu hardpoint with a search and destroy on Berlin after the fact. And of course, for the first time for both of these teams, as we said yesterday, it is going to be control. And that's going to be kind of the question mark, at least that I have for Florida State going forward, is, okay, you've shown yourself to be a nice primal force when it comes to hardpoint and search and destroy alike. Will you have that same respective gameplay when it comes to map 3?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, nevertheless, because when it comes down to the two that we have inside the map pool in between Gavutu and Tuscan, for control, one is heavily riddled by SMG presence, the other one is heavily riddled by AR presence. Now, if you're new to Call of Duty, this is your first time watching Vanguard as a whole, I'll just go ahead and I'll tell you the answer. Gavutu is definitely the one to showcase a lot more AR ability. You're going to get that in the same for the map one as well.
Well, if we need to go the distance, Tuscan will be maps 4 and 5 for a hardpoint and a search and destroy overall. But Andy, I kind of want to get your thoughts on this overall. We've seen Florida State kind of be a front-runner team, at least thus far, in a lot of people's not only power rankings, but overall how we feel things are going to shape up towards the end of the season. At least from what we've seen so far, do you think this Florida State roster has that firepower to make another jab at top 16 again?
I think that this one, again, is going to be quite telling to be able to see how they actually stand. Because, given how we've only seen them... Well, I personally have not really seen them play all too much since the Vanguard season has launched. A couple of Twitter clips here and there, but I think what we're mostly going to be looking for is what they can do across the best of 5 map series. If they can come out absolutely swinging, being able to put themselves ahead of the pace for what KSU has to offer on map number 1, like Gavutu, with their ARs being more dependent on those longer to medium range gunfights, I think it's going to be quite telling. If it ends up going to a map 5, I think that it has to be rather considerate about whether or not KSU can also be a top 25 team, or if FSU even deserve to be in the top 20.
A compelling point there overall. Florida State, unfortunately, going into this season, they were hoping to be in the pool with all of the Florida teams. Unfortunately, at least for right now, their division has more of the northern part of our southeast region. Overall, though, Florida State will hop themselves into the hill first and foremost. Brave Cannon will be on the board first overall inside of the map. You see one player trying to flank out towards the beach side, but should be able to clean it up here in just a moment. You have a few ARs looking over the point, and of course, about 25 seconds ticked off.
This is about a decent amount of time that you don't want to go uncontested if you are KSU, and I love this little collapse that came all the way back in. They waited for the power positions, McCormiel. They knew that they had FSU trapped like rats inside of the AA gun itself. Well, they were all buying some time. Snake got up on top LST. You have 2 SMGs that are bringing in the presence over by the ring itself. And then what this does well for KSU going forward is not only holding down the scrap time, but potentially a good look for initial time on 2.
KSU, a lot of people coming into this match, obviously, with Florida State's placing, kind of counted them out overall going into it. And as we set up for P2, one of the things that we've seen, at least so far, is the ability to have a nice slaying performance early on instead of a game. Get aggressive right out the gate, so you can go ahead and unlock yourself a bit of time. However, FSU have broken into P2 thus far. A few gunfights towards the middle of the map. You look for P5 rotations here from the side of KSU as they're going to start making their way up. 3 in a row here for SD. Make it 4. Almost able to jump around for 5. As I say that, 20 seconds left and another break coming through.
The break will end up coming through McCormick. Just down to 30 seconds. Still a lot of time to be fought over. Keep in mind, the rotation from 2 to 3 goes up to the northeast side of the map. Player number 7, Nasty, is going to be holding on to that cross. FSU have a double-edged sword to almost tackle for themselves here. Got to be able to hit through P2. Don't want to be giving up the scrap time for free, but you also have to fight for the rotation over towards New.
You also don't have middle map presence either, which is the biggest kind of single-handed thing to start making your way up the map if you even want to try and break into P3 for those spawns. Unfortunately, though, they aren't able to at least get the predominant P3 spawns at the end of the gate, but they do get the scraps for P2. So as we start making our rotation on over towards the next point, KSU will be the first one there. Shots won't be good enough for a trade on to SD. So although Florida State have themselves a nice 1-point advantage, it's not going to last for all that long.
No, not really at all. These are quite the monotonous spawns to be able to break up for yourself. Considering the fact that you got to get through player number 7 first, that's going to be SD on the backside of the customs zone. Going 1 for 1 is at least good enough. Finding the damage is even better. Considering the fact, to your point, coming away from 2, FSU didn't exactly have middle map coverage, but they found the kills inside the hill and on the backside of the antenna as well, McCormick. That's going to flip out the spawns marginally. KSU spawning in around P1 can still reinforce this hill.
And it's such a difficult gunfight, too, because now you lose the P4 rotation as well, because KSU were like, all right, we just got 30, almost 40 free seconds of time here before FSU even made the break on us, so we'll give you another set of scrap time, just like we saw on P2, and well, now we can rotate on early. So you're going to see the break start to make its way past that half point on the map. Exile's going to earn some nice shots on the snake across, but the spawns are still going to be close for KSU, and they're going to be able to get P4 at least locked down for the initial time.
Again, another hard point that's going to be very hard to be able to be broken up, but I like this little Normandy-esque push. Storming the beach is RFSU right now, trying to at least get themselves on the back side of P4. That's how you want to block the spawns, but hey, little spoiler for you. You got to be able to find the kills while you are doing that to be able to flip out the spawns. In KSU, they read that, especially pushing through the beach side. If you don't fly, you will end up spawning out, but luckily enough, from the positioning that KSU did hold previously to this gunfight that's ensuing, they actually allowed FSU to spawn up over by the Arch Rock, giving them a little bit point of entry. The players inside the hill, KSU, are starting to slay out, but of course the numbers will be dwindled all the way down. A nice break there coming through from FSU.
And Exile had to get that 2-piece there for the rest of the teammates to be able to break through the middle of the map, because you still saw spawns that were close for KSU. They get back to the point, and of course they're able to break in, but now you go look over towards that bottom right portion of the mini-map, and you see the white arrows of KSU already spawning there. So Kennesaw State, once again, they'll have an early rotation to a point. Florida State will be forced to find yet another break in the map. Fortunately enough, though, on screen, we're going to see Brave Cannon start to make their wrap all the way back through the spawns. He actually slips the nod of player number 8 in Trauma, so they're not going to know that the player's pushing back.
Inside P5. Very difficult hard point to be able to hold for yourself if you don't keep your head on a swivel. I mean, look at the setup right now for KSU. You got a player inside of Customs. The one lone player is going to be Trauma. They have no idea where the hit's going to be coming from. They did not read the spawns. FSU essentially spawning in for P3. KSL is able to find 2 in the back, but quickly getting traded back all the way through. Can Matcheries lock down the kill hip fire? Not going to be all the way there, but it's Exile for the cleanup. Closer spawns, of course, for FSU for the time being. Should be able to get themselves on this hill, diminishing the lead ever so more.
Maybe a bit of luck, maybe a bit of COD timing, but Brave Cannon was able to get behind enemy lines, break the spawns of KSU. Get a bit of time here on P5. Most important thing, though, is that we're basically dead even as we get back and ready to rotate on over towards point 1. You'll see Trauma once again rotated for Kennesaw State. Florida State, though, and the Seminoles, they've done a good job of keeping this game close, despite the slaying, at least predominantly in the beginning of the game, not really keeping up with KSU.
Yeah, it's one of those things, again, when you're thinking about Gava 2 comparatively to even, like, Tuscan, per se, especially compared to Bocage, you're not going to necessarily have a lot of opportunity for SMGs to find a lot of value, so you got to be able to pick and choose your battles, play a little bit more methodical hardpoint at the end of the day. Exile swaps to the Rat Pistol, can't lock down to the second one. Is it enough damage for Brave Cannon to come up, gets their trade, and gets the kill onto SD as well? Going to be another break for FSU again. The hill in the lead so far for KSU, it was marginal, but it's going to be flipped ever so more by FSU.
You highlight the kills that Brave Cannon gets. It's 6 in a row, good enough for 2 streaks. Full streaks now for Florida State. Still alive, requiring hill time here over towards P1. Still a bit early, at least right now, for Florida State to opt to just force their hand down for the rotation. You can break this relatively easily if you are able to spread across the map, but it's doing just that. That's the hard part. Snake will go ahead and pop a 2-piece. Still Brave Cannon on 6. Do you invest the streaks to break here?
I don't hate the idea of holding the streaks because it's 2 things, right? The glide bomb ends up giving you a lot of information. The changes to Fortify that happened a few days ago, you also are looking at to at least guarantee yourself a kill. Obviously, one of two ends up coming out. You would love for the kill to end up also following suit, because at the end of it, calling in the glide bomb, KSU now putting themselves into position to where they're not only staying alive, but they relatively feel uncontested. Players up top of the LST, they need to be dealt with. 3 quick kills do come through for FSU. It's going to be a break, but a late one nevertheless. This is a big stark difference of what we saw on the first set of hills.
Kennesaw State reinforcements all spawned up, ready to make a push. Snake will be the first one to find the opening kill. K-Cell on top of the boat, Trauma 1 and a teammate at the same time. But as K-Cell is there for a good kill, you still got to look to the middle of the map where Trauma is looking to rotate towards P3. This is kind of the same thing we saw last time, Andy, where Florida State were on the outside looking in for a P3 rotation when Kennesaw State got the early lead on the rotate.
Yeah, that's right. And they ended up breaking it marginally because they got players in the backside of the customs building. That player is going to be Exile yet again, trying to hit that route, trying to get into the back, but didn't fully check their corner off screen. SD will take them down. So now this is going to be giving up a lot of time for the initial when it comes down to KSU. But FSU's reinforcements, I like this. Very reserved and conditioned hardpoint so far. They're waiting for the respawns to come through, and we also have an investment of the strafing run. We'll see if it can end up finding any sort of value whatsoever, at least try to dissuade these players from staying on the hardpoint any longer.
And it doesn't connect. I love the idea. I love the push that Florida State were able to make. Unfortunately, though, at least for now, didn't look like it was going to work out all that well. 25 seconds, you finally get your first break if you are Florida State, and this should, if Kennesaw State doesn't opt to break back into this point, or they just want to rotate, get early time over at P4 since they're spawned so far down at the bottom of the map, should equate to at least that 200-point mark being broken for Florida State. So what looked very good for Kennesaw State early on instead of this hard point on Gavutu has easily turned Florida State's way on the second set of hills. I'm loving what I'm seeing so far, especially with the ability to turn that switch. And you have 3 different players that are streaking for Florida State.
I mean, when you consider the fact coming into the second set of hills, it's essentially about 80 to maybe about 20, 30 or so comparatively to FSU v KSU. They completely hit a different switch. They're starting to read the tendencies of KSU, start understanding their timings a little bit, and the slaying power is also coming through as well. 15 and 12 for Brave Cannon. Exiles now up to 21 and 19. Of course, they invested the 2 streaks, but Brave Cannon is also looking at the potential to get themselves yet another glide bomb. They're in the back for the spawns of 4 so far, McCornmeal, but the way that you're holding the crosses, specifically for Shank, it's a lot easier said than done to try to work your way in inside this hill.
And these methodical breaks from Florida State, sure, they might take 20, 25 seconds, but when you're able to execute those on the points, you're solidifying yourselves the last 35 seconds of scrap time because Kennesaw State's been rotating so early on after the fact. But as Trauma looks to the back now, you get 2 players from the side of FSU like, to make the push. They're still spawning close. And Andy, now this is where you look at that mini-map and you see all the white arrows that are all the way back over towards P5. We saw Florida State break the last time, but is Brave Cannon going to be able to get a good timing again to be able to slip the knot in the back spawn?
I like this call actually coming out from Messi to be able to contest this scrap time. This is actually big scrap time that could go over, at least try to keep FSU off the hard point. Look, you're only down by about 40 points. I know that seems like a lot when you're thinking about the hard points. Yes, FSU are almost to that game point victory margin, but even so, KSU, if they can keep locking down P5, Snake was able to find that kill. It could have been a huge argument to be able to hold down 5 for longer, but just short of perfect hardpoint needs to come all the way through from KSU to make sure that they don't allow FSU to get anywhere near this hardpoint.
And it was a 3-man hit from the front. The second one will fall, though. Snake goes big for the side of Kennesaw State to hold down the point. You got one more from the front. Shank will look over the top. Exile will pop up, play Duck, Duck, Goose. Finally, the Whack-A-Mole will fall to the hands of the Mallet, and it's going to be 218 to 218 as we go ahead and find Kennesaw State back in the lead once more here in the hardpoint. We'll at least have to see another set of rotations.
And that's what's scary, too. The first team that's going to be able to really solidify them over by ring ever since the opening break, that's where P1 can actually become a money hill. We probably won't end up seeing that margin as FSU ends up finding themselves a break. Lead swap yet again. This is basically a tie game. It's going to be a foot race for the respawns over here, and Shank is also finding themselves some pretty unique time. It could be behind some players here.
Yo, you look for one, the K-Cell turns around at the perfect time, and as Andy says, beautiful read. Might be game-saving for Florida State. You look back to the middle of the map. Nobody there just yet. Still pushing from P3 is Kennesaw State. Just 10 seconds now for Florida State to be able to take map number 1 in this best-of-5 series. SD, nade over the top. One last player to make something happen for Kennesaw State. Florida State, a great resurgence after the halfway point in the map. The second and third rotations go their way in a firm manner. They'll take map number 1 in this best-of-5.
Probably a lot closer than Florida State wanted, but at the end of the day, again, this is how we're framing it up. This is the biggest test that both of these colleges have faced each other in the College COD League here in this division so far, McCormiel. And there's one thing that I definitely do like, apart from, Exile finding 25 real kills, by the way, 19 of those not traded. Brave Cannon also right next to them at the same time, around the same stat lines. But the one thing that I really did enjoy as a whole when it came down to FSU was that they were okay to give up a lot of time, because they
Sure.
know how Gavatu is intrinsically played, so that way they can always end up putting themselves in certain rotations, and they can put themselves in more complex situations to be able to break the hills. They're okay. You brought it up wonderfully, as we can take a look at some of the stats as well while I'm talking over this point, is that FSU, while they're giving up so much time, they're playing for the space first and foremost. Gavatu is a massive map. You can fit about like 3 Bokages inside Gavatu. And that being said, you're not always going to be able to break things through the front. They're playing for the favorite spawns. They're playing for a methodical hardpoint. And when they ended up holding that lead, they were playing that leader's advantage, which we definitely appreciate when it comes down to high-level Call of Duty. And it's nice to be exemplified here by FSU.
And look, I know I've alluded to it twice already, but I want to just one more time highlight, the rotation over towards P5 specifically after point number 4 had popped by Brave Cannon, because he got behind 2 players on KSU, and if Brave Cannon doesn't get behind those players, force the squad spawns on the side of FSU to be right behind P5, I don't think they break that hill, and we could have been looking at a completely different rotation when we got over towards the second set, back over towards P1, where it could have been KSU who easily could have been, instead of up by, like just about 20 points, it could have been up by, upwards of 60, even 70.
Oh, easily. I mean, you'd have to consider the one fact again, like all this time that they were giving up to be able to break these hard points. I've seen teams try to do it on P3 and 4 of Gavatu, P2, P3 as well for Tuscan. A lot of hard points come to mind for Vanguard that when you take too much time, when you end up getting smacked in the behind. And that's it. That's one of those things that you have to be very, very careful of. You're just very, very lucky at the same time that the pinches were successful on 2 different sides, because it was the difference in between giving up 25 to maybe 30 seconds worth of hard point time initially, while also finding kills, giving it up to a lot of the game clock. But still, you're also looking at the fact that if it comes up flat, then you're going to be giving up a solid 50 to almost 60, going to be throwing the lead down the drain if it doesn't come up successful for FSU. Probably wouldn't work against some other teams within this division that have just as strong, if not a better hardpoint, if not the ability to be able to slay out, because that's the biggest stark difference when you're looking a lot of those KD ratios, especially for Gavatu, you can slay out inside the hill, you can find kills on the rotation, but if you're not consistently finding those slays, especially while the hardpoint is active, obviously the team that is outslaying you in that department will be able to do it, especially when it's on FSU's side, when they're always playing for the spawns as well.
Yeah, Andy, now I got to kind of ask you another question here. We went into this map with, obviously, Florida State and Kennesaw State both having undefeated records overall, as well as undefeated map counts overall. So they haven't lost an entirety of a map throughout the entirety of the CCL season thus far. However, now we go into a search and destroy where Florida State has the advantage. They've been in this situation multiple times throughout the season, as I've stated beforehand, but now Kennesaw State, for the first time, is having to go into a map 2 with a loss against a tough opponent. What kind of mental restraint does that put on your team?
I mean, for the entirety of Call of Duty, for so many different titles now, this same kind of consideration and conversation always comes around to be when you end up finally losing that first map. You have to completely negate it. It cannot phase you at the end of the day. You have to be unfazed by, losing your first map, because if you're a team that's in this Southeast division for Division C, you got to understand something, is that there's going to be a team maybe during the regular season, if not when you end up getting towards that elite play, that you're probably going to lose a map one of these days. So you're going to have to approach that mental fortitude one of these days. It just so happens that it's right now. You cannot let it phase you, though, because, again, it was 250 to 222. You did not lose that by a massive margin, McCoy Mill. So when we hop into this Berlin Search and Destroy for KSU, you just got to play your game. The Owls just got to fly, man. You just got to be able to do what you did to be able to always find yourself those values and give yourself the reasoning why you were as undefeated going into this best of 5 series versus FSU, just as much as FSU were as well.
Berlin is a map that I have come to enjoy for Search and Destroy quite a bit throughout the entirety of the season. It's led to some great round 11s. It's led to a few upsets here and there, but more importantly, I think a map like Berlin, from what we at least saw in map number 1, kind of favors Florida State with the way they wanted to play a bit slower and methodical when they were breaking some of those hills. I think it'll be kind of the same way on the defensive and offensive approaches when they find themselves on this map. Either way, though, it's going to be a 2-2 split right off the gate here on the side of Kennesaw State as they push over towards the B site. You got a player inside with the bomb now making its way over. Snake around the right. Going to be able to find the first blood here in the round. It's a nice little pick and a great start to the S&D.
Is anybody going to contest this meet? You got players around the corner. Snake's actually kind of holding the mid line, finds their second within the round, and now the numbers really just falling by the wayside for KSU. Just KSL left alive, and well, you'd have to assume that this player's not going to stay alive much longer. They know exactly where they're located at, and there it goes. Yeah, it was a great opening hit, all things considered. When you come into Berlin Search and Destroy, you are mostly kind of tasked with two different fronts for your opening offense. Do we just bull rush over towards A? Do we bull rush over towards B? You have to be trying out these very, I'd hate to call it, but Papega strategies, right? Like, you got to be trying them out in the early goings. Until you get pushed back, you got to be able to try the rush idea. And if you end up, going down off of the early rip, Snake doesn't find those 2 kills, then you can start playing more methodical search and destroy. So I love that coming out from FSU. Just going for the smoke execute, trying to get yourself inside a beat. Didn't even need the smoke. Now it's KSU's turn, trying to do the same thing.
Walk you through it. Names at the top of the screen are reversed. Colors are correct, though, either way. Brave Can and Mad Truth both will fall early on. Snake actually slides past one, gets the shots. Oh, okay. Got a little bit scary there for a second, but all of a sudden, once again, for the side of Florida State, you're in a 1v-odd situation. This time it's a 1 versus 4. Snake is pushing, looking for streaks. There's the kill, and that's 5 in a row for a glide bomb.
You see, that's the problem with being colorblind, McCormill. Said I can't always just tell off the colors. I just went off the names alone, and it completely bamboozled me. See, hey, I cast a curse myself. I brought the word into the cast, and came back to bite me in the rear end. But yeah, I do quite appreciate the idea of just trying to, heat up your gunny, see if you can end up finding value over towards the B site early on. But I mean, for this KSU roster as a whole, Snake is 5-0 to start with the SMG, just finding themselves really good timing, aggressively pushing up that river road. And they're able to find themselves a glide bomb within the first 2 rounds. That is big. So now FSU, they're putting 3 players over here this time around, trying to stop this B rush from happening.
Tama on site, bomb in hand. Shank once again will open the door up for Kennesaw State with 2 quick kills. Trauma, oh, you know where they are? Oh, that's just so unfortunate, though, because the red barrel will blow up at the last second. Takes out a few players, but now it's a 1 versus 2. Once again, for Florida State, you're on the backside of a bad push.
2v1, KSL. Well, we've been here before, but less numbers. They already assume your positioning is going to reposition them now inside of Mail. Did not get the information on 1-player crossing. It's going to nicely, gently open up this door, McCormill, but here comes the push. Could end up being pinched. Check the left corner. Check the left corner. Doesn't fully check it. Oh, we got to go back to James Bond 007. We got to figure out how to clear out all those corners. And again, it's one of those rinse, wash, repeats. Even defense and offensive like, this KSU roster really loves this B site.
It's just such a hard gunfight to take, too, when you're sliding into the door like that. You come around the corner, especially with an automaton, opposed to an MP40 who's just posted up in the site. And then they can play the trade because the win condition for them then is just sitting all the way back by the warehouse district of the map, and then just being able to use an AR over the top, find a few shots, and then keep them off the bomb while playing time. So, overall, offensive push, though. This time, Florida State opts to choose it up. It is going to be over towards A. Still keeping up with the 2-2 split, at least at the beginning, was Kennesaw State on defense. They're going to push 1 directly into the A site. Player number 4 will back the challenge there as well. You got player number 6 in Brave Cannon, who's just looking to make me play inside. Mad Truth and Snake will trade out 3 versus 3. Now SD making it a man advantage again for Kennesaw State. Snake is on 8 in a row, by the way.
Yep, has not died. You took the words right out of my mouth and in my brain. Yeah, it's that's terrifying. He's twisted. Getting a challenge. Brave Cannon even got the first bullet, and Snake was just like, yeah, I got a jump button, and just wins the gunfight. 1v2. Mad Truth still has the bomb in hand. Love to see them try to full wrap all the way back behind B, but it seems that they're overly committed to A. You got time.
3 donuts on the side of Florida State right now. Mad Truth 3-3 overall. Reminds me of what happened with Yulee the other day inside of the Challengers qualifiers. We all know how that one went. On the bomb will fall Kennesaw State. Another good round there. That's 4 straight. So this does not look like they were phased whatsoever by map number 1. It might have only fueled their fire.
For those that don't end up watching, Challengers, Yulee, what was it, like 15, 16 kills, while the rest of his team had like a combined like 4. And it was literally this map too. It was a Berlin Surge. Oh man, wait, I gotta go ahead and say that. Poor Yulee. Snake though, still yet to die. 9-0, fully streaked out of their eyeballs. And it seems like KSU are definitely coming with that Augusto that we were kind of framing up. The search and destroy, definitely a strong one to be had. Seems a little bit of a disagreement as far as what they're doing for the opening rip. Bomb starting to move over towards A, just holding down the concourse, seeing if any defensive players are getting over-aggressive. But for right now, it's just a little bit of a stall angle. Nice little timing. Again, Snake is just... I mean, he's a wizard.
10 quick kills in a row, and they have been quick because these rounds have flew past us. 58 seconds left in the round. If only the side of KSU knew that nobody was at the A site right now. It's where they could push this bomb up the map, get it down, and then maybe play. I was going to say maybe a streak for a retake, but it's going to be a lot more difficult over at A. You could just invest a streak here, go up 5-0, and then force a full sale out of Florida State, which would be kind of ironic, leaving him in Florida. But at the same time, KSU looks over towards the right. Trauma will back out towards the left. If you are the side of Florida State, you're just trying to make this push back onto the site. You're trapped, though, because of time.
Trapped because of time, and look at this retake as a whole, McCoy Mill. They're all in the upper courtyard. There's nobody trying to make a flank play happen. This is going to be a very linear retake, but to the point, I mean, the Owls, they're all stacked inside of the office and down in the concourse, so, hey, play the trades.
KSU will pop out. Actually, doesn't see the player from behind. Trade's going to come through, and all of a sudden, okay. Well, I mean, I guess you don't have to send a player on the flank in order just to get 3 quick kills if you're Kennesaw State.
Look,
I don't know.
Hey, look, the FSU SWAT team came back in, baby. I mean, it's not exactly a normal retake, if you can tell by the canter in my voice. You don't typically end up seeing 3 players just stack up together. If it was a 2v odd, yeah, you try to play for the trades at that point. But with 3 players, it's just like, all right, you get the trade. If you don't get the trade, we got the third person here as well. But, I mean, hey, you come in there and you find where all the players are located at. That's a wonderful retake to finally put themselves on the board. It is a Hello Kitty Band-Aid over the bleeding that KSU has already put themselves on so far. Now leading by 3. FSU would benefit from an offense. And KSU kind of went for broke. They put 2 players defensively over towards A. And FSU are kind of slow-rolling this over towards B, trying to get some information. Stuns, nades, not really coming all the way through. KSU not giving FSU much to play off of.
Right now, it's kind of like shutting down Raid Boss Snake, because at 10-1, nobody else has really found any sort of, I guess, high intriguing slaying numbers overall. But I mean, you really don't need to. Again, when your teammates at 10-1, a little bit of a struggle to knock out that window there. Mad Truth looks back over towards the B bomb. They're just playing this very, very slowly. Same thing can be said about the defensive side, who's just waiting for a move to be made by Florida State.
Time the immediate adversary, 40 seconds. Snake is holding an angle. Look, this MP40 is like a Maddox from Black Ops 4. This is not a, I guess, unmeasurable range that you can find a kill on. No smokes. They're just going to try to cross, and well, he's going to see one. And I like this call from Snake. Yeah, just reposition themselves, start the flank play happening. I like this.
Glide bomb going to be used. Are you going to be able to get the kill on the players on the second? There's 2 of them inside. Yes, you're going to get both of them. Oh, that's just pretty. And I guess Florida State don't realize that the glide bomb gets called in, that they can go directly through the roof. You thought you might be safe inside there. There really wasn't anywhere else to go. Shank around the corner, and Kennesaw State, just like that, invest a streak and win a round off of it.
Look, the glide bomb is the big bad wolf. That is a straw hut at the end of the day. He will come over, he will huff, he will puff, and he will blow down. You are not safe inside that B hut, McCoy Mill. Players need to start understanding that. They need to start realizing that when they're pushing over towards the B site, you knew Snake was on streaks. I mean, come on. The dude was like 9-0. Like, you knew he was on some sort of tangent. Definitely has both streaks in mind, but FSU slow rolling, not really giving themselves many different options. And I love that. I thought that Snake was just going to end up committing towards the middle of the map, just allowing ST to commit towards that flank play out from the concourse. But even investing into the streak, you still have one. You still have the strafing run. It looks like that they might end up trying this roll over towards B. It is a round 1 strategy, and FSU try to go for the Hail Mary call. Nobody at home at A, so now 3 players. It looks like that they might all flank through the back.
It was a Hail Mary call proper, but now you have a streak to retake over towards this B side as well if you're Kennesaw State. You couldn't have done so at A. Florida State had to realize that at some point, but first blood on the board. Shank is going to be the one. The KSU side of things, the advantage. ST around the corner, 2 in a row. Florida State, I mean, with 25 seconds left and you got to find 4 kills. Sorry, partner, that's just probably not going to happen.
Oh, Snake. 13-1. It's able to snap for the second, but can't find the third from behind. Would have been absolutely magical if we were living before GA land and you had a magazine in that automaton. Might have given himself a good argument for it, but you only had 26 bullets to do it. It's a bullet hose, and you won't be able to lock down all 3 kills in quick succession of one another. 6-1. The final scoreline, but I mean that's not as impressive of a number in the stat line comparatively. Snake going 13-2. I think we understand why this this Kennesaw State University has not lost a search and destroy, McCoy Mill. They have a snake.
They do have a snake, and a massive one at that around the map. But more importantly than anything else, proper, I have to say, you know, for Florida State, that was flat out embarrassing overall for a search and destroy performance. We saw almost no adaptations and or changes from their roster throughout the entirety of the map, and that was 7 rounds where Kennesaw State were just pounding it to them.
Yeah, we can go ahead and take a look at the stats as well. I mean, it's going to be quite compelling to the argument of the score line as well. 6-1, 13-2 for Snake. He only got two of those kills were traded, by the way, and that only happens with about, what is it, like 3.5 seconds, almost? I don't trust the first blood ratio, but what I do trust is that damage number, about 1,300 damage out from Snake. And, yeah, I mean, it's impressive nevertheless, but, yeah, I'll agree with you, Alex. It's more of a disappointment than it is anything out from FSU. You know, you can be a strong respawn team, but Search and Destroy is a bread and butter game mode here in Call of Duty. It will forever always be Map 2 and Map 5. S&D will win you matches. It'll win you championships at the end of the day, because you don't always want to end up going up 1-1 into a Map 3, because maybe your control isn't as good as your hardpoint as a whole, but even more so than that, all these linear takes, these linear offenses, these retakes as well. I mean, it was cool seeing the FSU SWAT team break back into the concourse, but that looked very unrehearsed. It looked like FSU just don't trust each other on Search and Destroy when they get pushed against the wall like that, McCormill, and it's something that they have to immediately correct for themselves if they want to hope to be able to be a top dog, not only in this division, but the league as a whole.
And it's a bit confusing as well, especially that feeling that they don't trust one another in Search and Destroy, simply because in that hard point, there were times where they were breaking in a 3 versus 4, and it seemed like around the map, it was perfect amounts of trust, and the synergy was also perfect in a lot of those moments. But you go to the Search and Destroy, again, it was not close. A 6-1 Kennesaw State victory there. The Owls soar high, and of course into the night. But we're not done in this series yet. We're guaranteed at least 2 more maps. We've got ourselves coming up next to Gavutu Control, followed by a Tuscan Hardpoint, hopefully, and maybe we'll see a map number 5 between these two teams, because it's been fun so far. But number 16 in Florida State has been challenged thus far in map number 2. Either way, we're going to step aside when we come back. Map number 3 on Gavutu, and a control between both of these teams. Series overall, 1-1 we're tied here between Florida State, who's ranked number 16, and Kennesaw State at the same time. Andy, the S&D wasn't close. The hard point was the disparity overall thus far seemed like it's just maybe S&D is Florida State's weak point. Kennesaw State are still good at. Nicely put.
Props to you. Props to you for putting that as nice as you possibly could. Because if to be completely candid with you, the hard point was competitive. It was close. 250 to 222 was the final score line. But they got absolutely milly-whopped in that Search and Destroy. I don't care whatever excuses you have. You're not a top 20 team, a top 16 team during the regular season if your Search and Destroy looks like that. Versus what, again, is a not-ranked team in the top 25 list. Now, I know that Jesse was in here, exclaiming KSU is a top-ranked team. And I'm starting to believe him, man, because, like, that hardpoint was steady. Snake was gross during that Search and Destroy. Let's just put it that way, where you dropped, like, somewhere near, like, 13 kills. Real kills, keep in mind you, and also got some sufficient help from his teammates as well. But even still, I think you have to look at this in the perspective that these two teams are arguably a lot closer than a lot of people have been speculating. Specifically looking at you people who make those top 25 rankings, never count out KSU. They are clearly here to play. They clearly have something to end up showcasing for themselves. As we prop ourselves up for a control here on Gavutu, we'll take a look at the best of 5 series here for us ourselves, McCormill. It's going to be quite telling, because now that we're tied up 1 apiece, this is quite literally a swing map mode combo in its own self.
Absolutely, and I mean, we go all the way back to last year in one mode that Florida State at least had a lot of proficiency in was Control. Now, again, it's not the same roster. You have a few returning pieces and a few key parts, but from different teams that have kind of fused themselves together to make one complete roster here instead of the CCL this season. But again, you should at least have some sort of semblance of what you found in Control last year and be able to bring that into the game of Vanguard this year. However, Control feels, at least preliminarily, a little bit different than it did last year overall, and I think that could definitely throw some teams for a whirl. But as long as there has been some sort of consistent practice, at least this far, it should again be a Florida State win on Control here for Gavutu. But nothing is too sure after the Search and Destroy.
I'm throwing everything out the window, man. I honestly don't know. It's hard to gauge where these two teams do stand up against each other, because Control, if you're new to Call of Duty, it's got a little bit of Search and Destroy. It's got a little bit of Hardpoint. You got those respawns. Of course, you will be spawning in with 30 total respawns. Tick progression is what you're mostly looking for. You get yourself one of those entire control zones. You extend the clock to 60 seconds. Now, one of those zones are a lot easier, let's be honest here on Gavatu, a lot easier to get off the opening rip than the other. Looking at that A zone, in the bottom side of LST ship, where P2 does reside, that is the easier zone of the two to be able to get. My biggest concern right now, coming away from that 6-1 milli-whopping against FSU, can KSU keep up the pressure? Will FSU bounce back? Because when it comes down to their breaks, especially coming back to that hard point, McCormiel, well, it was a lot more methodical. They took a lot more time, but I love this opening engagement coming through from KSU, actually, or yeah, from FSU, excuse me. They were able to absolutely fly here on the offense, get players inside of the boat itself, and they're stopping that clock quite early.
First bit of progression for the side of Florida State going to be on the board. Brave Cannon, who made a great flank instead of the hard point to give Florida State an upper hand at the end of the first set of rotations, will stay alive. But Kennesaw State breaks on back into the point. Snake, it's not an aggressive challenge just yet, but Exile can't seem to find a couple of shots down on the player below. Finally, will be traded out by Mad Truth. The reinforcements are there. Trauma and SD will trade 2 for 2, and Kennesaw State will once again be trying to break with a split push here into the ship.
Stopping that clock again. It is around the minute margin. Lives are just about even. Shank's going to get scouted out. Player up top of LST. A lot of the focus here for Florida State is actually through the middle of the road, and well, KSU can actually retake this with relative ease. Yeah, Snake comes back up on the top of LST ship, just completely unchallenged. Yeah, sure, Truth is going to take them down from up top of the jungle path, but there wasn't a whole lot of consideration for KSU's attempt to be able to take that back.
And right there, I mean, even though you don't go ahead and maybe hold down the entirety of the A zone, at least you tick 10-15 seconds off the clock if you are Kennesaw State. And of course, even with the minute and 50 seconds that Florida State should have here once they go ahead and complete the capture of the A point, it's still going to be so hard to get over onto that B point.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to break over inside the B zone, again, was one of the harder two already. Well, you have to do that while SC's in your spawn. FSU are essentially playing this in a 3v3 across the entirety of the map. Well, now a 1v3, as it may be, 2v3, excuse me, as SC will take down Exile in the backside of their spawn. Yeah, completely negate that. You got to get over towards the opposite side of the customs building. It's going to be one player that's over here. It's going to be Snake. They're just holding a long angle there with the automaton in hand. Can Brave find the trade? Yes, they sure will. So step one of a many different step process is completed so far for FSU. These two players that are over here, McCormill, need to hold their life while the rest of the reinforcements work their way across the map.
Agreed, but you look to player number 2 in Exile, trying to look over towards the beach to see if there's a few players going to be holding towards the spawn side. They are. Kennesaw State had such a great defensive hold right there. They were forcing Florida State through the south side of the map, forcing them basically to retake take the B zone all the way through their spawn, and it's worked out wonders for them right now, because ST will find 2. Mad Truth, sure, you get a 2-to-1 trade there. That's cool, but you still get the players all the way back for the side of Kennesaw State in their spawn. One player will lay down, stun around the corner, 15-10 advantage right now with 35 seconds left.
And you would have to assume that this is probably the last best look for FSU, given the time, given the lives, for them to be able to amount towards any sort of offense. Nice little 2-piece does come through from Dan in the back. It's going to open things up marginally. But you still have SC up top, over by the ring. They were on 4, of course, the second that we swap over to them. The second I start gassing them up, they get gunned. So 3 dead for KSU. 12 seconds now remaining, trying to get their way into the back. Snake will find 2. You got to get on the zone. You got to stop the clock.
Gotta stop the clock, but you didn't read the spawn. You allow KSU to spawn up, find everybody and more. Exile, the last one alive. Sure, you maybe find some streaks there as a consolation prize, but overall, you're gonna lose the round. The defensive side, as we thought coming into this map, is gonna go ahead and take the first round overall. Kennesaw State looking nice on a good old hold there in round 1.
And one thing that we always have to consider as far as the fact is concerned for Control, if you're coming away from Cold War, is your first time talking or watching Vanguard Control, it's not tick progression anymore. So getting those 3 ticks over by A doesn't mean anything. It's actually down to kills if it goes defense for defense all the way to round 5, Alex, to be able to solidify who's going to be the defensive team and who's going to be playing on offense. So slays absolutely do mean everything. Now, of course, to win an offense would be monumental. Very difficult to do here on Galvatute. Mad Truth will find that first blood again, much like that they did the previous one. Still, a lot of space for KSU to walk in. Well, at least that's what FSU wanted you to think. They were holding a lot of good angles. K-Cell's going to hit it up top of the boat, just dwindling down the numbers for our FSU to KSU. But a nice 2-piece will come through from Trauma. Should buy some space for the reinforcements to try to get back.
Buy some space. Also buys yourself a glide bomb. Onto the staircase, you look for potentially what would have been the shooty pilot, as Cruz and Spaz would say. But as Mad Truth doubles back for a 2-piece, Florida State will be able to hold down that A point. Shank working the way up through the flak gun. This is kind of the point in the map where, you know, you're still wanting to push over towards this A site, but you're trying to at least split the defense just a bit so you can maybe, just maybe, get a bit of progress towards that B zone.
Dan's gonna call in the glide bomb. Gonna drop it right into the gut of the LST ship. Won't find anything. Well, the information was more than aplenty, as KSL will clean things up now on a 3. 2 kills away from getting themselves a glide bomb of their own. Knows that there's going to be one player in the middle of the map. At least sees one. It's Match Root to clean them up towards the middle of the map itself. And, well, FSU have done a great job just holding the space, holding the middle of the map, getting a lot of good map coverage as well. Just reading where KSU are constantly coming from. It's a linear hit, again, to get inside of the LST ship. 19 seconds remaining, and FSU have a hefty life lead to boot.
More kills flooding in. Red in the kill feed right now. KSU, despite what Florida State was able to do on the offensive side, have really not been able to push out of their spawn at all. 5 seconds left. This is your last good break to maybe add an extra minute onto the clock. You get in towards the point. 3.6 seconds left. You look to the spawn side of your own health. You look for that first bit of progression. Still pushing up the map, though. SD at the top looks for the spawn and the reinforcements of Florida State to make their way up the map. You've done a decent job right now. You've got your first bit of progress, but you still have 2 ticks to go and only 3 seconds of FSU breaks.
Hey, but an extra 60 seconds with only a 6-kill deficit, I mean, this would be very winnable if you're able to do so. But, again, it's all just consolation conversations. As one player's going to slide out, tries to slide back in, and try and loses their 1 to the clock. That's tough. It's really, really tough. So 2 rounds in a row here for FSU being able to, or back-to-back defenses, excuse me, will come through for both KSU and FSU. But the one thing still remains is that FSU, they only lost, their opening offense by maybe like a kill or 2 in that department. That one was a solid 7 kills or so. So KSU, coming through on this defense, need to keep up the slaying power that they also showed on their previous defense, while also managing it into the later round if it ends up being a defensive round win. But FSU are playing with a certain amount of moxie. You can see player number 2 is Exile all the way on the beachfront. They're splitting the defensive members for KSU. Snake needs to go big up top. Only goes 1 for 2 as Exile is still existing over by Ring. Keep in mind, FSU are getting a lot of map coverage through this opening break.
You know, KSL only might be 10-10, but there's been a lot of big engagements that KSL has been able to win for Florida State that has opened the map for them so perfectly. As you see KSL towards the bottom of the ship right now, SD will slide around the corner. Unfortunate timing to put the gun down there, but Kennesaw State on the defensive side will retake the ship once more. It will be the spawns in for Florida State. You've got everybody now pushing towards the ship. In towards the bottom, Shank and SD. Once again, we'll find the first 2. You try to go ahead and get a couple with your Brave Cannon, but you're really only good for 1. You got 1 more player that's left on the ship for Florida State. And as they get knocked down, Kennesaw will once again retake map control.
Still need to stop this clock. All these kills are going to be great. The map coverage, even better, but still have to mount an offense over towards the zone. SC's trying to play their life by the mid-tank. Easier said than done as they're going to get collapsed on. KSL's going to stop that clock at 32 seconds. The sun is going to dissuade them from staying on the zone even more so. Still not a whole lot of progression to really speak of. Would love to be able to get this A zone, our FSU, so that way they can extend the clock. But KSU are just being so proactive with their positionings, their repositionings, and retakes as a whole.
KSL down the staircase, gets 1, but traded from behind. Gonna be Snake, comes on through. Brave Cannon around the corner. Oh, great shots there. 1 more. SD, you lost the gunfight last time, you'll lose it again. 2 apiece for SD. KSU COD once again around the point. You just got to try and stop the time, get the capture on the A zone. But again, as we said before, on the offense, it's so difficult to be able to take zones on this map. A is the easiest, B is so hard, and even if you go ahead and capture this here, you're not going to have a lot of time to work a push over towards the B side either.
Nope, not more than likely. 3 seconds is where the clock will be stalled out at. You get this last tick of progress, gets contested, Traumatized ends up challenging it out. We'll end up finding that kill, and the clock will run out. KSU on defense, showcasing that they can definitely retake these zones. But again, when it comes down to FSU's break, they had themselves quite a good look at it. What was it, like maybe a 3-for-1, 4-for-1 at the beginning of it? Yep. Can almost get a player to stop that clock immediately, but they kind of hesitate as far as their positioning is concerned, making sure that they had players on LST while also trying to help out Exile over by the ring, over by P1. It just comes up and blows up in their face because the returning players for KSU, the second that they get up inside the docks building, they immediately just have angles on top LST, and nobody was even having any consideration looking at that. So now KSU, knowing that they can almost go for broke here, that they can close it out here. I love this gut check call. FSU were expecting them to come through an A, and Trauma's going to call in a glide bomb, giving themselves even more space. That is a big opening for them. 3 kills to none off the opening ripoff for KSU in their favor, calling in boat streaks, trying to get themselves on B early.
They can hold that south side too, because SD You spot one over towards your left. You wait for a second. The challenge comes around the corner. Now you can hop back onto that B site and maybe go for one over the top. But I love the thing, or at least I love to play towards the middle of the map now because you don't send anybody over towards A. Your sole goal here is trying to get B. You had a few lives to spare if you were Kennesaw State, at least at the beginning of this round, before you get back over towards A. The problem now is, of course, that clock that comes in, but nobody from Florida State is over at A now because they sent so many bodies to B.
Trying to split the difference here. This is control within a nutshell. Don't find success over by the B zone. Immediately shift your focus over towards A. You don't try to attack B twice on over, especially when you get gunned the way that we saw from KSU. So now you take your offense's worth. You try to put yourself over at A. Nobody in immediate power position, though. Exile is going to try to hit the flank with the Rat Pistol in hand. Going to try to lock down a few kills. One player on top of LSC tries to challenge out to SC. They will lose their life for the cause. Clock stalled out at 26 seconds, and KSU are able to get that first stick of progress.
5 in a row now. If you're looking to snake, who got streaks instead of the search and destroy, went on a 10 in a row. Instead of map number 2 as well to give Kennesaw State the advantage. Halfway through the tick of progress over towards the A zone, you're looking for number 2. You have the extra 60 seconds, at least at the standstill right now. It would be a minute and 30 that you would have to go ahead and capture the B zone. And after that first break off where you only had one person from Florida State who was holding that B site, that just gives you the glimpse of how truly difficult it is to break not only from the beach, but of course not being able to push up to the south portion of the map and able to break into the spawn side.
A minute 13. 21 v 15. If you can continuously lock down these kills for KSU, you can turn this into a glorified team deathmatch. But it's easier said than done with how far you spawn out and how far you need to go before you can end up finding the positionings for FSU. So just keep the pace down where it is for FSU and just know that you got to be able to find these kills because, I mean, I wasn't adding up all the kills. I don't even have my TI-83 Plus calculator right next to me here, Alex, so I'm not too sure who ends up having the lead going in towards a 5th and final round. But I would have to lean more towards KSU. Snake, calling that glide bomb. It is. Oh, thank you. If someone has their calculator right next to them, that's good to know. But even still, calling in that glide bomb, trying to at least get their space, won't be able to get either or as FSU answer back with a quick 3.
Trauma. Do a bit of rubbish. We'll be able to find one. Looks for the second around the corner. Just gonna lay down on the beach. Such a difficult kill to be able to find, but Trauma gets it done. 15 to 7. More than a double life advantage lead. But you still gotta work the 22 seconds of time. And as Kells is gonna be able to find 3 in a row on all players from the side of Kennesaw State, that basically shuts down everything that they could have had in terms of a push over towards B. This very easily should lead us into what should be a round number 5 proper. And the only reason that I actually knew that the side of Kennesaw State was up last round is because when you were going through the rigmarole at the end of that, when it was like when you're going into this round, I was kind of looking and I just was like measuring everything up, and I was like, oh hey, they have more kills.
I tried to avoid doing caster math. I'm not gonna lie. Wasn't necessarily my strong suit. That's why I went into training animals out of college. Not gonna lie.
Every number that for the kills that Kennesaw State had was just one more for every player on Florida State, so they had a 4 life advantage at the end of their round. That was.
Yeah, I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Quick maths.
Come a long way from last season, not being able to do math.
You learn. KSU on the defense here, and it's going to be quite telling. FSU cannot amount this offensive round when the swing map mode combo hanging in the wings here. KSU seem to be the one that's going to be flapping it all the way home as they have a tremendous opening rip. No kills to speak of here for FSU. There's finally the first, but a lot of map coverage so far for KSU through this opening break.
South, top of the ship. Looking for the spawn side of Kennesaw State. You're going for your first bit of progress at A. Minute 5 on the clock. Only about 25 seconds ticked off thus far. SD looking to make a push in towards the ship. You're going to be the first one forward on the side of Kennesaw State. Exile looking to the spawn. You know that one person most likely will be coming on a flank, but that's a beautiful 2-piece there from Mad Truth. A 4 down for Florida State. You have a 3 life advantage and can now work your way into the spawn side of Kennesaw State and try to work your way over towards B. It's been a great little streak. 3 and 3 for Mad Truth and Exile alike. Looking to earn some streaks as Exile, who will be on number 4.
Quite the turn of events here after losing the opening break-off so convincingly. 2 minutes on the board after capturing the A zone with a 4 life lead. Tough gunfight versus Trauma. Exile just trying to keep their hat on a swivel. Nice nade coming out from Snake. Perfectly medium rare right into the lap of Exile will go down. So no streaks to speak of. And that's going to give KSU an opportunity to have Shank go on a little bit of a flank route. Snake's trying to get Mixie inside. Oh, KSL brought a Shank to a gunfight. And up close personally, I'm definitely taking the Shank. 3 dead again for KSU. Look at all the map coverage on the backside of Customs. FSU, they're marching towards this boat.
You dwindled down the life count for the side of Kennesaw State just a bit, but they've evened it back out from what was about 7 to 8 lives in the favor of Florida State. Now it's down to 4, up to 5. KSL will finally find streaks once again for Florida State. You're looking maybe for number 6 in a row. You'll be able to get it. That's full streaks. Now the biggest question is, do you use them here And the answer is yes. Glide bomb over the top from the spawn side. Kennesaw State now making the push. Oh, down towards the site. You're going to be able to find one. Now the reinforcements can start making their way up the map, but there's only one player there, and it's Mad Truth. It's a 1-on-3 at the point.
1-on-3, Snake finds 2. Clock is still being stalled out. Second tick of progress denied. Shank's going to be able to walk away with that in the positioning as well. Snake almost able to get a good look at potential more streaks. 32 and 28 for the kid, by the way. Very casual stuff. 31 and 24 for Mad Truth on the opposite side, but got to be able to amount towards an offense. And nobody understands that Shank is going to find some timing on the backside. This would be quite damning if Shank can find at least 1, if not 2 kills up here. Here comes the go. Gets the information. Can they find these kills, though? All these walls are still up. It's quite the nuisance. Sees one player. I love this trigger display. And Trauma finds 2 on the backside. Shank's going to complete the flank. And, again, blows up in the face. 13 v10, 45 seconds remaining.
It was a flank like that in the hard point that actually was snuffed out by Florida State when it looked like it was going to be equalizing maybe to 2, even 3 kills that would have completely secured the game for Kennesaw State. Either way, though, Florida State now making their way up the map. You look at the pinch play that Kennesaw has now set up for themselves, but Mad Truth will be the first one to knock down a line of defense. 11 versus 8 in the life count. You got one player on the B zone, but there's players that are going to be there for the flank. Brave Cannon might be able to go up big, and he does. He takes down Shank. You look to Trauma, who's now pushing towards the point. Snake up the side. KSU, a beautiful kill. Around the corner now. This is great. You got 2 ticks of progress. It's a foot race now for Kennesaw State. You're down by 5 lives. Shank from the left. SD trying to go to the flat gun, but oh my goodness, KSU once again will hop around the left side corner. You escape with your life. Almost able to find another one. SD Trauma, double back. Somehow, some way, you're not allowing them to get onto the point. It's still 7 versus 4 as you push up the map.
No response remaining for Kennesaw State University. Brave looking, throws some shots, gives away their positioning. All of FSU stacked over by the ring. Just one more push, and they can do it.
Brave Cannon looks to the left, is able to find the first, might have one from behind. You look to the second player. SD's going to win a huge one-on-one. Traded out. Oh, Florida State win the first offense that I've seen here, at least thus far on Gavutu, and are able to take not only series lead 2-1, but of course win the Gavutu control with 2 quick rounds in a row and a daring, devilish, and dashing push at the end there of the offensive round.
Look, if you're new to Control, this kind of has a lot of shades. Back in Black Ops 4, we always end up talking about this as analysts and casters alike, that it always ends up coming down to be who's going to win the first offense? And we keep on asking that continuously, back and forth defense as we go, kind of like shades of like frequency control, where things just feel so back and forth, just so linear between the 2 teams, like defense for defense, defense for defense. All right, someone's going to have to win an offense eventually, and it's going to end up being the team that wins the first offense and wins out the map. And it typically happens in around number 5. Wonderful return to sender is FSU going against KSU. Remember, in that last round, it was a swift 3 or 4 dead. When we take a look at the stats, they're not going to be quite as telling. Again, from top to bottom, it was pretty darn even Stevens. You know, you had Snake continuing on with their mischievous ways, as we saw in the Berlin Search and Destroy. 36 and 22 for them. Offensive and defensive kills don't get tracked properly, but those numbers are still quite alarming. You can tell they don't get tracked properly, because I don't know how Mad Truth goes 36 to 27 and has 42 offensive kills. It doesn't make any sense. But regardless of the matter, they still had 4,000 damage, which is equating in almost equal to what Snake was able to bring to the table as well. It was just the positioning factor and the ability to resurge themselves. We saw it from KSU a handful of times on defense and a handful of times on offense, but the one team that constantly gave themselves the better look to be able to capture both zones was Florida State. 2 times over. I mean, Kennesaw, they gave themselves a real good attempt to potentially try to get the B zone in their opening breakoff in their final offense, but every single time that they even captured the A zone, Alex, it was never really much of a push. They barely ever got past the comms room, the docks building, whichever you decide to call it at the end of the day. It's one of those things that you have to be able to recognize that Florida State University, much like that hard point, they're much more reserved. They're much more controlled, if you will. No pun to the game mode, obviously, but it's still one of those things that you have to be able to exemplify on a massive map like Gavutu, playing off your spawns, making sure that you're reading where I spawn, where they could potentially be at when they're trying to rotate their way back in towards the break on the backside of that jungle area. In FSU, they were able to do it phenomenally, especially off of that little resurgence. They had the kill lead, but it only came down to the final few seconds. It was, what, like a 6v4. They had the life lead. They were able to recognize, look, just one more break. Let's find information off of stades and or off some nades. It almost feels like search and destroy at that point. Just play the isolation, play off the information, and then collapse. Wonderfully played out for Florida State to take the swing map here on Gavutu.
And it's so fun, too, especially when you make that late push all the time in control where, like, all it takes is 1-4 down to be able to take an entire zone. And then after that, it's just about finding kills off of spawns. That time, they didn't even need to find the kills off of spawns. They actually were able to find all the kills before the zone was even completely captured. So, overall, for the side of Florida State, it was a great push there at the end. I love how they didn't play too reserved. They actually had a bit of aggression there, especially when Brave Cannon was able to find that first push, finds the left side kill when he was able to hop around that rock. And then you look out to the player who was trying to just play a little bit more passive and wait for maybe one of the two players that was trying to bait out, who then fall to where you can get that trade after the fact. Florida State, though, they played that perfectly, just like we saw then at the end of the hard point, which again was extremely close overall against the side of Kennesaw State, but now with a 2-1 lead, taking both the respawns proper. We go into a map 4. It's another hard point, this time though on Tuscan. We'll get a double dose of Tuscan if we do go to a map number 5 all the way at the end, but just talk to me a little bit right now about confidence levels for both of these teams.
It's hard to judge where either one of the two are at. I mean, look, when it comes down to it, maybe Florida State, maybe they are that bad at search and destroy. Maybe they are a respawn team. There's a very valid argument for that, but then I also raise the consideration, like, how are you not practicing search and destroy at this point in time as well? I mean, you want to be considered to be a top 16 team. You want to be considered to be a top 10 team. You better hope that you're as well-versed in search and destroy as you are in the other game modes. Not to mention how that control wasn't exactly decisive by any stretch of the imagination. Came through from those final moments. But on Tuscan Hardpoint, confidence obviously has to be there for both the teams. On one side, you have Snake and SD going absolutely AWOL in the respawns. On the other side for Florida State, walking away from the Gava 2 control and the Gava 2 Hardpoint, one thing still resides, is that they play very reserved patent aggression when it is necessary, and that could be quite beneficial when it comes down to Tuscan. Recognizing when they need to be rotating for money hills such as 3, 4, and 2, and then being able to rely on the submachine guns to be able to break from the front inside the hardpoints. You won't have as much time here on Tuscan as you will on Gava 2 to be able to constantly try to work your way into the back. As you can see here over by P3, over by this fountain, it's not as easy to be able to get yourself inside the back due to the narrow choke point. So it's going to be quite telling to be able to see which SMG lineup is going to be able to come out on top, or hey, why not some set nades in the automaton to open things up. Great start from FSU.
Hope FSU's downfall doesn't come to the hands making a great push, but just a little bit too slow, as Andy was alluding to. Mad Truth over towards P1, going to be able to find one to the elbow. Looks to the right. Player pushing up the middle of the map. For now, though, Mad Truth, you get the first 20 seconds of time here on the clock. 25 seconds left. And, of course, that right side map, down over towards that bottom square, is where we will be rotating over to next for point 2. Florida State on the offside. Kennesaw State have rotated early. Brave Cannon had made some good routes, at least through the flanks, to find some early spawns for Florida State, or at least the beginning of a break. This time, though, it won't be anything close to that, as Kennesaw State are very early in setup.
And you got to respect that out of Kennesaw State, right? I mean, they're willing to concede the rest of the hardpoint time just to make sure that they're guaranteed these P2 spawns McCormick, because from that opening rip, they immediately spawned out over by P3, and that's going to be quite alarming if they can't lock this down. 2 kills on quick rotations are coming through. The 2 players for Kennesaw State down by the column are kind of left by their lonesome while the reinforcements are coming through maps.
Flank all the way through. You have 2 players that push through radio, cut off anything from Kennesaw State as they come off their own spawn over by the HQ in P5. Florida State, just a clean, easy break that only took about 5 or maybe 10, 15 seconds overall. Either way, though, Mad Truth will try to slide away down the staircase in the back. Unfortunately, won't find anything except his own death. Brave Cannon there. Close spawn still for the side of Florida State, but just like we saw Florida State do through the back spawn, Kennesaw State have done themselves. The only problem now is that push might not have allowed them to have the early rotation to P3.
And this is the moneyest of money hills when it comes down to it. Nice rotation to kill coming out from Exile, and Mad Truth is going to catch Trauma on the rotation inside of Vines. If you can get set up back by that half wall exactly where Exile is, this becomes a nuisance and a half to be able to break. You have to win this on 2 different fronts. It has to come through the roofing and from Vines. Some set nades obviously coming through. We'll deal with Exile over by that half wall. Now KSU are going to be looking for the break.
KSU in the back with an MP40. Usually see a player with an automaton in the back. This time, though, streak going to be used over towards the left. Nobody there from the side of Kennesaw State. You're going to have to wait for reinforcements to push up if you're Shank, because you don't want to solo push this, and it's going to be very difficult to push on through when KSU once again has been able to go ahead and run through your offensive push. 35 seconds left on this point. Mad Truth going to be looking to the back. A few more players from the side of KSU now making it in. Unfortunately, they won't actually be able to get onto the point, though. They're just going to run directly into the Ream of Exile in the back, who's 10-2.
You kept it contested, though, and I know that it's about a whole hard point and then some in between these 2 teams right now, but even still, contesting time is still better than all the time going over towards FSU, but Now here's the pace differential for FSU versus KSU. We actually saw this during the Galva 2, and although that hardpoint scoreline was very, very close, the pace was nowhere close at all. Nat Truth kind of finessing around the little awning here. SD definitely would prefer to have that MP40 than a pistol, and that gunfight will be traded out. But you look at the rotation over towards 3. FSU were so quick off the scrap time from 3 to work their way through the column area and get themselves in the backside of 4, making sure that KSU can't get set up.
They didn't even realize that Trauma was all the way in the back, but finally, Florida State will clear out the entirety of their spawn. The Seminoles are looking good inside of the church right now. They played all the way through the back once again, just making sure they cut off every single angle that they possibly could before they go ahead and find themselves a lion's share of hill time. Mad Truth from the front will be able to find number 4 in a row. You're looking for potentially 5 here in just a moment, but nobody that close, at least for Kennesaw State at the moment, to be able to push on in. Shank will back all the way off. You're going to fly all the way over towards the HQ. You've opted to give up this time, and of course that amounts to a 100-point lead for Florida State that's only going to continue to grow over the last 15 seconds.
Yeah, you know, a nice little casual 110-point lead going into P5 in the first set of rotations. This FSU squad is nasty. I mean, quad positive for Exile coming into P5. Double positive for Mad Truth is on a 4. Has the potential to be able to look at a glide bomb early on here. Be quite beneficial even going in towards 1. You can play a little bit more loose at that point to be able to play off the kills. Exile will find 2. It's a quick 4 dead. The hit never really made it past the front door inside of maps. FSU playing a little diffy right now.
Another break that only takes about 15 seconds in total time in order to execute, and they're already back in towards the point, racking up the time again, almost at 150 or about 100 points off for being able to win this game. Kennesaw State, on the other hand, it doesn't even look like they've been able to pick up their controllers at this point. A few slaying numbers are okay overall. You're down by almost 130, almost 140 points at this point, and now Mad Truth has streaks.
He's speaking the streaks, man. 14 and 6 on a 6 in a row. And everything that I was highlighting for KSU to be able to almost up the ante, to be able to get themselves an argument, would be Snake and SC, non-benefactors. Double negative for Snake, 6 and 14. SC not too far behind, 7 and 12. Double negative for Traumatized, 5 and 12. 9 and 15 for Shank. This is not a good look for KSU to be able to take this map off of FSU. Can't really count them out quite yet, or maybe we can start really counting them out now. Nice little glide bomb will come through from Mad Truth. We'll take care of Shank, but a quick flow, 3 kills in a row will come through from KSU, trying to get themselves here on P1. Mad Truth, though, trying to play for the future, will end up getting themselves the hold on to the squad spawns over by 2. And with such a hefty leader's advantage that FSU currently hold over KSU, you can play for the spawns. You can play for the late breaks at this point, because it's more annoying for KSU than it is anything.
KSL will be on the point, playing for the contest. Brave Cannon around the corner, tries to go ahead and slide in for 1. Mad Truth, though, will be there for the cleanup. Exile will just look to the spawn side of Kennesaw State because they're so far across the map. You already see Brave Cannon, who's rotated down towards that bottom portion of the map. We'll have a big one-on-one off screen against Trauma. We'll actually go ahead and see it. And, of course, Brave Cannon will be able to walk away with it. So 190 to 39 overall. After a very close hardpoint that was within 25 points of one another, you have to ask yourself, is this the same situation we saw in the Search and Destroy? Did KSU just not be able to come to this map prepared? Or was Florida State just the better overall team?
I think it's just FSU. It's just the overall better respawn team, the better hardpoint team, I'd say, right now. The control obviously showed a lot of dark spots, but obviously being able to win it definitely does speak volumes. But, I mean, they're just playing better hardpoint, McCord Mill. You know, the rotations, the understanding, the power positions that they're also finding themselves. Like, you can play this type of ratty hardpoint going forward because, again, you have a casual 160-plus point lead. 209 to 42 right now. And FSU, I mean, they're just flying at them. The SMGs are not done. They're just isolating the plays. What kind of sensitivity are you playing on, Brave Cannon? I gotta know. As Snake will, of course, find those 2 kills. It's just consolation kills at that, as FSU are just unbroken on this P2 hill. Well, never
Another
mind.
set of streaks. KSL flies out in the middle of the map, somehow able to stay alive. Doesn't realize the challenge is coming over from the right. Sure, it's a consolation kill at best, but guess who's already rotated towards the next hard point? It's Exile, who's playing all the way in the back. Now you can just hold the push from the middle of the map that's coming through. Snake gonna be the first one there, forced to turn around after a stun check comes through. Player Brain Trauma trying to make your way over towards that outer portion, and it's just so hard to go ahead and able to break against Florida State, because not only have they been slaying out the entirety of your team, they're so close to being able to find a 3-1 win. The search and destroy, okay, say what you will, but the respawn domination from Florida State cannot be understated whatsoever. A couple more breaks from the side of Kennesaw State might be coming in. Exile on 4. So many streaks earned from Florida State. 3 seconds to go, and as they go ahead and eclipse the 250 point, they put the side of Kennesaw State in the 50-point club. We'll say sayonara, 3-1 series win for Florida State University.
We'll be seeing you. That's, wow. Galvatoo, I mean, this is what I was mostly concerned with. When it comes down to Tuscan comparatively, I didn't really want to frame this up because, you know, I just enjoy being right and wrong all at the same different points in time. But I mean, like, it's a pace differential in FSU on Galvatoo where they were playing more methodical on a map like Galvatoo where it is required for you to always play for those very methodical points of interest, to be able to play for those spawns, to be able to get those close-range gunfights. That's where FSU feel a lot more comfortable when they have the information, the understanding to be able to get themselves those close-range engagements with the submachine guns. I mean, it was just insane. Like, let's take a look at some of the stats because it is going to be, you know, quite compelling comparatively to the scoreline that we ended up getting, 250 to 46. I mean, Exile was pissed. Like, 24 and 8 out of this guy. Like, 22 of those were not traded. Only went on a 5 streak. Come on, Dan, you could do better than that. But even still, Matt Truth was the guy to really watch out for. 24 and 9. Yeah, only had one more death, but when they were alive, you could feel it. 2 minutes and 31 seconds worth of hardpoint time, Alex, and 11 objective kills to boot. That is absurd. With an SMG in hand, constantly and always berating the enemy team. That's what Tuscan can reward a team like FSU when they're able to turn it up to 12, when they're able to hit the gas pedal through the floorboards of the car into the center of the earth. That's what it will look like. It almost felt like a mismatch, specifically in Tuscan Hardpoint. But you go back to the other 3 maps in the series, they felt really competitive. But on a map that is so close range, like Tuscan, your Bocages as well, this is FSU at its prime. Definitely got to understand that they probably don't want to be taking themselves any sort of maps close range if anybody's going to be facing them anytime soon, that's for sure.
We just looked at Kennesaw State, and we'd look at the slating numbers. 9 and 23, 9 and 19 for 2 players, another player with only 10. You only had 2 players go double digits, and even then the second player that wasn't double digits in terms of overall raw kills barely got there in the first place. So that was very telling of what Kennesaw State showing inside of Hardpoint can look like, but we also saw the opposite end of the spectrum in map number 1, where they also looked very good. Same thing can be said for Florida State. Obviously, we didn't get to see a second search and destroy or an opportunity for redemption from them inside of the mode, but overall, that still was a relatively disappointing, kind of scratching your head moment of the series, and that also is the only map that they have lost the entirety of the year thus far up to this point. So, Florida State, they'll stay undefeated. Kennesaw State, unfortunately, will find their first loss overall in the season. But, I mean, Andy, just being undefeated for Florida State at this point, we talked at the top of the broadcast of how important that was for this division. Can you just kind of, like, state that for the people at home that might not understand how important that could be?
Yeah, I mean, you have to consider the one fact. We're in the Southeast region, Division C, if you're looking at the website as a whole. You're in a division with Mox COD, Georgia Southern, Bama Crimson. These are solidified teams to be able to beckon themselves as top teams at the end of the road. Again, top 3 teams will be your quote-unquote elite teams going forward towards the end of the season. And for FSU to be able to come out of the gates and absolutely wipe the floor with another team that, again, has been able to come away undefeated versus other bottom barrel teams in this division, you're going to be able to feel quite good about yourself. You're going to be able to at least solidify yourself that, hey, they absolutely belong to be in a top 20 team and to be able to be considered in your top 25 pick'ems when they end up coming around at the end of each week here for the CCL. It is quite good that they can solidify themselves as potentially that 3rd team to be able to compete against that top elite spot. When it comes down to it, just have to wait to see for the next time that FSU Esports go up against, say, Mox, Georgia Southern, or Bama to be able to see what they truly look like against a team that can stack up their pace the same way that they did today.
Fun series, proving grounds for Florida State. For Kennesaw State, back to the drawing board, but your season's not over by a long shot. Either way, 2 more matches here on the Alpha stream for today. UNCW going up against High Point Esports next. Myself and Proper will take you through that one as well. And while we go ahead and get that match set up for you, it is 2 undefeated teams overall, so keep that in mind. Might want to stick around for that. We've also got the Bravo stream going on. So in the meantime, while we go to break, you guys can go ahead and check that out as well. Go show them some love down there, and of course, the players and the casters alike. We'll be back here in just a moment, though, for the next matchup, and of course, finding another team will find their first loss of the season.